All right, everybody, welcome back to the Skyfall Sessions. Ta-Nehisi Coates has a new book coming out called The Message that is an ode to writers, and as a writer myself, of course, I'm excited about this. I'm a fiction writer. But in terms of news, he does get into some pretty good socio-political conversations, so let's dive into that.
Ta-Nehisi Coates is a New York Times bestselling author and recipient of the National Book Award, among other accolades. His latest book, The Message, is in bookstores now, and he joins me now. Good to see you, man.
Good to be back.
Back at it.
Good to be back there, too.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with this from the book because I think it sets up our conversation and all the conversations people will see you having over the next few weeks. You said the late Jamal Khashoggi, the murdered writer from Saudi Arabia, was fond of the Arabic proverb, say your word, then leave. I try to live by that because I am at my worst out there defending, you say my children, which are your books, defending my books, and I'm at my best making more of them.
All right, some quick facts about Jamal Khashoggi. He was a Saudi journalist, the general manager and former editor-in-chief of the All Arab News channel. So he was born in 1958. He had a long career in journalism. He was kind of an activist. He had some powerful words to say against the Saudi government and whatnot. And on October 2nd, 2018, he disappeared when he went to go get his marriage documents. And he was never seen again. It was later found out that he was murdered, likely from his outspoken stance against the Saudi government. So definitely some tragic and brutal stuff. Let's go ahead and continue on with the interview.
This part of the gig, I think, is your least favorite.
Well, being here with you is not. The thing I was actually thinking of was this sort of discourse that happens when writers write what they write and then somebody replies and then the writer decides that they need to clarify. I've engaged in that in the past.
It's a trap a little bit.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's really helped me.
Well, part of what makes it hard and part of this book, as much as anything, and someone asked me the other day, I was raving about it and they said, what's it about? And that was brought up a little short.
Right, you just stop, right? You and me both.
Well, it's writing.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's a love letter to writing.
Yes.
And part of what comes through is that the work that goes into the clarity of writing is almost impossible to do in any other medium.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was like a really, really important thing for me. I think people forget that, in an era where, obviously video is so important here. But I think people really forget that at the base of it, somebody has to write something down, and, when I was teaching at Howard University, which still am teaching, with so much of this.
Here, the thing, I didn't realize he taught at Howard. That's some good information. But again, the thing is like that the power of a writer is to be able to write something with enough clarity that people understand it and it moves people. That is a powerful tool. And it's also very underrated. Like people don't really pay attention to that skill. So I like that Ta-Nehisi Coates is pointing that out.
Book comes out of. The thing I was trying to impress upon my students is even if all of you don't go on to be essayists, poets, fiction writers, the process of learning to express yourself with clarity is valuable. It's valuable no matter what you go on to do. The things that I try to do, in the extreme, in order to write a book like that is no different than the things I try to do when I'm trying to write a memo or email.
There are 3 essays in this book. The one that I think is probably going to get the most attention.
Dakar.
Yeah, exactly. How'd you know?
And this is where we get into the social political stuff. So I think, this will be interesting. Ta-Nehisi Coates at one point went to Israel. He wrote a little bit about that. If you remember, also back in 2014, he wrote a memo on reparations. I think it was called the Case for Reparations. So that's what they're about to discuss right now. He talks about this in his book, The Message.
Most attention and the most controversy and the most discourse is about your trip to both Israel and Palestine, to the West Bank and Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel. Just start by talking about your way into that story. Like what you write a little bit about that in the essay about a few lines in the Case for Reparations that you felt like maybe you were glib about a history that was much more complex.
I think glib is the correct word. When you're writing something radical, as it was at the time, in 2014 for the Case of Reparations, you're really always trying to ground it in some sort of real thing so that people can perceive it. And in the case for reparations, it was reparations, and I want to be very clear about this, from the state of Germany to the state of, actually West Germany to the state of Israel, not necessarily directly to Holocaust victims.
Right.
I neglected to ask a very important question, which is, what is the nature of that state? Because for me, the case for reparations was not simply about compensation for something that has been done, but about making the world safe from a particular kind of oppression at large. And as it turned out, as was very clearly revealed to me when I, did my travels, to use the state of Israel, reparations to the state of Israel as an example, actually undermined the very message of the thing I was trying to get across.
And this kind of humility is something that we need to see in more people. He was able to say that, okay, I wrote something that I thought was clear at the time, and I realized in hindsight that maybe it wasn't the proper way to go about that. This is something that writers do. This is why that writers are often progressive. Obviously, it's not always the case, but writers are usually very forward-thinking people because they have more perspective. They look at different things in life, and I think that Ta-Nehisi Coates is able to admit this because of that.
That's in the article.
And why is that?
Because Israel's an apartheid state. And I don't mean that as a slur. I mean that in repeating the reports of Amnesty International. I mean that in repeating the reports of the Human Rights Campaign. I mean that in reporting the reports of the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem. I mean that in reporting the fears of Israel's own prime ministers, Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert. And I mean that in terms of what I actually saw, which was a society in which half the people live and have the benefits of full citizenship, and the other half live on various tiers somewhere below that.
So when you think about the context of what he just said, where there's people who live at a certain level of citizenship, and then there are other people that live below that, and he knew that immediately once he stepped foot in there. In the first day, then the second day, it was very apparent. That tells you how things truly are over there in Israel.
This was immediately clear to me the first day I got there. And certainly by the second day when I was walking through Hebron and I literally saw streets where certain people could walk down and certain people couldn't, where I could walk down as long as I was clear that I was not Muslim and other people could not. When it was made clear to me that I was with a group of people and spending time with a group of people who, should they fall into any sort of trouble or get into any sort of trouble, would be treated by the military justice system, while all around them were Israeli Jewish citizens who were subject to the benefits of the civil system. You can imagine the difference in the degree of harshness there.
This is why he calls it apartheid.
It went on. It was pretty clear across the board in terms of the laws and the policies.
I've been on those same streets in Hebron and had the same reaction, which is that this is obviously a moral abomination.
Obviously.
But I thought about your case for reparations essay because the gap from the case for reparations is on, to me, irrefutable and rock solid moral footing.
Yes.
It is the case that American wealth was built on the plunder, that there is something owed. From that moral certainty.
And I like that they're speaking from a place of like reality and truth. It's not really debatable. It is definitely a fact that America is so powerful as it is because it was built on the back of slaves. That's not even a question. So I like that they're having a discussion rooted in reality versus so much politics, which is rooted in just like stupid talking points.
To the, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? Things do start to get more complex.
Yes.
And from the moral certainty of standing on a street in Hebron to, this is not morally acceptable,
right,
to how do we have 15 million people between the river and the sea with full equality, peace, and flourishing? That is more complex.
Yeah, that is. But you know what? In many ways, the next step is a lot clearer to me, in fact, than actually it was the case for reparations, because the other thing I was confronted with was the extent to which Palestinian voices have been completely pushed out of the frame. So the first step is actually an easy one, to elevate, the voices of the people who are actually having the experience and ask them what should happen here, and not,
It's difficult to elevate the voices of the people there in Israel when most Israelis, or maybe the Israeli government, I don't want to put it on the people, when the Israeli government does not want to allow that to happen.
One or two of them, but in some sort of mass way, in many ways, that essay is about my complex relationship with journalism, which I love, which is a process I love, which is one that I actually applied right there. But I have to tell you, and I've said this and I'll continue to say this, I would be very interested in how many major media organizations have a bureau in Jerusalem where they have a Palestinian correspondent or bureau chief. I would love to see those numbers. Obviously, I think, anybody should have the opportunity to work that kind of job. Just like I think anybody should have the opportunity to cover race in America. But if there were no Black people doing it, or very few, we'd have a problem with that.
It's interesting you say that. Let me just stop for a second. It's interesting you say that because I thought about you choosing to write about this topic. I thought of a conversation that you and I had before I wrote my second book, A Colony and Nation, which is about race and policing and the criminal justice system, in which we were just talking as friends, and I was like, I don't know, I want to write this book, but is it a little weird for a white guy to write this book? And
yeah, the funny thing is that is often a question. We're talking about racial tension, or we're talking about racial issues, or ethnic issues, or issues in different areas, and you're talking about a white guy from a place of privilege. Yes, you still do write that. You just make sure you reach out to the proper places, to the proper people and the proper voices when you do it.
You were like, well, you're an American. It's it's your story as much as anyone, so you should write about it. And, in the case of this, neither you or I are either Jewish, Israeli, Palestinian, or Arab. Mm-hmm. But we're Americans, and America is not some small part of what's going on over there.
No, we're a large part of it, and it's marked everywhere. There's an essay an exhibit I talk about, City of David, where I went to, where there's an actual plaque that thanks America for its support. I was recently reading.
So yeah, America is heavily invested. I don't know if we should call Israel a special ally, as Biden put it, and that they get just full pardon and we just give them all the money in the world no matter what they do. But yeah, this is proof that we are heavily invested in Israel.
A report by a Palestinian American scholar, Nora Erekat, and Josh Paul, who resigned from the State Department. And one of the points they made was every plane that drops a bomb on Gaza was gotten from here. Those are our bombs. We're responsible. And that's what, a lot of times the pushback is, well, look, there are bad things happening, all over the world. Why particularly are you picking on this one thing? I'm picking on because I'm responsible. Because it is the presidents of this country who have said, we have a special relationship with Israel. So if we have a special...
So, yeah, this is where he said that they're a special ally. So if we have a special relationship, then we feel responsible for what's going on over there. Because our tax dollars are going over there. It's our government that puts all that money into defense bill spending as opposed to, or defense contract spending, as opposed to things that help the American people over here. So while we're funding a literal genocide, we're over here feeling like, wow, we're responsible for this. And this is our government that's doing it, not us.
Relationship, then I have to treat it specially, if that's a word. Especially, maybe. And so that to me was what, very much called me there.
I want to talk about some other things.
I love that he's so humble. He has a lot of humility. Even being an excellent writer, he's still humble about his word usage. It's funny.
But I want one more point on this. The thing that I have already started to see people say about you, and the thing that I think you will see a lot of, will be basically of this form. Mm. That you are well-meaning but naive, smart and curious, but essentially got led on a very one-sided sort of propaganda tour, a kind of Potemkin tour, in which the full complexity, you could have been taken to Surat and you would have met Israeli families living under rocket fire, right? Mm-hmm. You could have, this all happened before October 7th, but you could have been taken to Israeli victims of, brutality and terrorism and things like that. And that you came away with this very one-sided image from this one-sided experience.
It's so funny that he did this many years. Was it 2014? I believe that he did this. It's so funny that he did this so long ago, before any of the October 7th stuff happened. And he saw the state of things even back then. So this is not new. That the Israelis, or the Israeli government, is definitely treating the citizens of Gaza, or the Muslims there, in a less than full citizenship status. That is what would be, by definition, an apartheid state.
Well, I'll say two things. The first thing is, it is very, very difficult to spend almost 30 years in media, as I have, and not be very much exposed. And frankly, to live in America and be a thinking person and not be exposed to the defenders of the Zionist project. It's hard to do that. It's all around us. So that was not the thing I was lacking in familiarity with. The second thing I would say is, look.
Really quick note on that. I want to note that he is a journalist. He is a writer. He does look into these social issues on a regular basis. So it's more likely for him to understand the Zionist issues than the average person. There's a lot of this information that I did not know back then. Definitely. I know a lot of people don't know, but that's what these interviews, that's what these channels, that's what these news channels are about, is basically teaching us about the stuff that we simply didn't know.
Look, I am against the death penalty. Okay. I don't care if the guy slaughtered 10 children and ate half of them. I don't think that person should be killed. There is nothing I would see that would change my opinion on apartheid. Absolutely nothing, Mike.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So obviously some people will have different thoughts about that, but I see where he's coming from. He's saying basically attack, like a revenge of that scale should not be considered justice, right? Justice should be considered justice, and that's what the Israelis should be seeking. He's not saying that exactly, but this is what I'm pulling from this, right? So the Israelis are seeking far more than justice. They're seeking revenge, and at this point, after 41,000 plus deaths, genocide.
Case is not based on a higher.
And mind you, the genocide that we're talking about, really quick, is not based on, oh, well, because they killed 41,000 people this time. It's based on what was already in place before, like what he noted when he went to Israel so many years ago.
Or elevated Palestinian morality. It's not based on a notion that Palestinians are somehow angels or somehow morally better than. This is what I believe about human beings. And there's no thing that I would see that would make that go away. I am against segregation. I am against apartheid. I am against Jim Crow. Nothing will make that okay. Nothing they can do would make that okay.
I agree 100% with him, because whenever you do segregation, whenever you do apartheid, whenever you do one people above the other people, there is automatic subjugation, there is automatic privilege given to one people, and there is an automatic lesser than status applied to one group.
There's a line in the book that I think is kind of the thesis of the Ta-Nehisi project. You were talking to two. There's an amazing organization called Breaking the Silence in Israel.
Yeah.
Two folks that are Israelis who had served in the IDF and who then come out later to talk about what they had done and how morally abominable the occupation is. And you say they were raised under the story that Jewish people were the ultimate victims of history, but they had been confronted with an incredible truth, that there was no ultimate victim, that victims and victimizers were ever flowing.
This is for human beings.
Wow. That is a incredibly powerful statement. I'll see what Coates has to say about that, but that was wow.
This is true of human beings. And just like Zionism doesn't represent a particular a Jewish exception or something that, is being perpetrated that human beings haven't done before, that humans aren't capable of doing, you don't get an exception from the fact that victims victimize all the time. That is the nature of the thing, and something that, frankly,
victims can victimize. Powerful.
A Black American carrying all of that, presently wrestling with.
I mean, you write about that in The Beautiful Struggle, just at the micro level of your block in Baltimore.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. There is no inherent deep nobility. Now I'm speaking of my own people, for having been subjected to enslavement, Jim Crow, et cetera. It's bad. It's wrong. Hopefully it confers some degree of wisdom upon you, but sometimes it doesn't. You know what I mean? And sometimes people just decide, hey, the lesson actually is power, And so I look, that part that you just quoted is actually very, very important to me, because the people you are quoting are people who served in the IDF in the actual occupation. So it's like, what was I supposed to do? I talked to people who were victims of it. I talked to people who did it. Is it that I did not talk to the right people who did it? I'm just not. I
think it's just that the state of things, like he said, the state of victim and victimizing is ever flowing. It's going in and out. There is no one morally correct person. It goes back and forth. And I think that was incredibly eloquent what he said. So, yeah.
That's hard for me.
in one of the essays of the book, you travel to South Carolina, where you meet an English teacher who teaches an AP English class who had assigned Between the World and Me, your second book. She assigned it Between the World and Me. Yeah.
An excellent book, Between the World and Me. Also the first book by Ta-Nehisi Coates I've ever written or ever read. I read the Black Panther. I'm a big comic fan, so I did read the Black Panther run, and it wasn't my favorite. There were definitely some eloquent writing. It wasn't my favorite in the broad sense, but Between the World and Me is absolutely one of the most excellent things I've ever read in my life.
Just checking, just making sure. Between the World and Me, her AP English class, and pursuant to the sort of critical race theory panic that we saw come in the wake of 2020 and South Carolina law and complaints by local school board members, it gets pulled. And you go down. I love. It's a beautiful essay, but I also just love the scene because you go there expecting.
Yeah.
Basically this like full reactionary high.
I was ready for it.
Ready for it. And what do you get when you get down there?
I think that we forget that when somebody says this is a very, very red district, like that means like 70-30, and 30% is actually a lot of people who are fully capable of organizing themselves.
That is very, very, very true. So we kind of get scared when we go to, oh, this is a red place and people are against me and blah, blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, diversity of thought is great. It's not really diverse if it's 70% and you're in the midst of that 70%. But yeah, but the 30 by itself is quite a bit of people if they all group together.
And that's what I saw. I saw that people were quite upset with the prospect that this teacher, Mary Wood, who was from Chapin, by the way, who went to Chapin High School, homegrown teachers in the high school she went to, that she would be driven out because she deigned to expose her AP English class, by the way, to this book, and folks turned out to support her, and it was.
And that book, again, it's so incredibly powerful. And it's just a culturistic book. It talks about Blackness in a poetic form that is so easy to understand. And we need that in classrooms. I don't understand why we would ever deny a classroom that kind of perspective. It's just wrong to me.
It was magnificent to see.
I do think like there's a deep humanism that runs through I think your intellectual project and your writing project and through the book, which comes back to this, like, there are no fixed categories of humanness,
right.
And that the racecraft, the desire to create these fixed categories is always in the tool of creating some hierarchy.
Yeah.
But that the work of writing and the intellectual work of clarity is to constantly be pulling away at that fiction.
It is, what you just said is extremely uncomfortable and true. It's like the great difficulty of in my mind, of
uncomfortability. People have to learn. People of different backgrounds have to learn with the uncomfortability of understanding other races and backgrounds. No one person is better than the other person. And specifically for white people in America, because they've usually had that privilege, for a lot of them, it is most difficult for them to understand this kind of culture.
Of being a writer, because you're never completely at home. You're never really, you never have the luxury of saying, these are my people, we're right, we're okay, this is my side. No, these are my people culturally. These are my people historically.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you that tomorrow I might not have to say something.
Right.
And I saw that. I saw that in Israel, by the way. I saw that up front, that I might not have to say something. I might have to say something that might, find me an outcast, from my own home,
Yeah, if it's a true thing.
Ta-Nehisi Coates is the author of The Message, which I heartily recommend you read. It is out now. You can get it wherever you get your books. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll end it here. Oh my gosh, it's so incredible. I really like Ta-Nehisi Coates. One of my favorite writers of all time. At the bottom it says they're the best-selling author of Between the World and Me. I will be, of course, getting The Message, and I will be reading this probably ASAP. They probably announce when it comes out, but I will definitely be jumping on that immediately. Anyways, thanks you guys for watching again. The Skyfall Sessions, again, brand new channel. If you can, please like and subscribe below. We're trying to get more followers. This is a brand new channel. Again, we want to put out more progressive news and more insightful knowledge like this, where I commentate on other stories that I think are important to get out there. So yeah, check me out. Thanks.